When Oliver was in his 20s, he thought building wealth would solve almost every financial problem. If he could just save enough, invest enough, earn enough, life would eventually become simple. And for a while, that seemed true. Every year his savings grew, his investment account slowly climbed, his salary increased. From the outside, it looked like everything was moving in the right direction. Then something unexpected happened. The more money Oliver accumulated, the more complicated his financial decisions became. When he had almost nothing, his biggest challenge was obvious. Spend less than he earned. Save what he could. Keep going. But once his net worth started growing, the mistakes changed. They became quieter, harder to notice, and far more expensive. If you've ever wondered why some people build impressive wealth only to lose it, or you simply want to avoid the mistakes that become more dangerous as your finances improve, consider subscribing. On this channel, we explore the psychology behind money and the decisions that quietly shape long-term wealth. Now here's what surprised Oliver. The biggest threat to his financial future wasn't another recession. It wasn't inflation. It wasn't even picking the wrong investment. It was believing that the habits required to build wealth were the same habits required to keep it. They're not. Because building wealth is mostly about discipline. Protecting wealth is about judgment. The strange part is that nobody tells you when that transition happens. One day you're focused on earning more. The next, you're making decisions that could quietly erase years of progress without realizing it. And the most dangerous part, almost none of those decisions feel like mistakes while you're making them. They feel logical, comfortable, even responsible. That's why so many people spend decades working toward financial freedom, only to discover that the biggest risks don't appear at the beginning of the journey. They appear after you've already started succeeding. And the first one is so common that millions of people fall into it every single year without ever noticing it's happening. The first trap didn't look like a mistake. In fact, it looked exactly like success. Oliver got a raise. Nothing huge, just enough to make life a little more comfortable. So he moved into a nicer apartment. A year later, he bought better furniture because the old pieces suddenly looked out of place. Then came a newer car. Not because his old one stopped working, but because it no longer matched the life he felt he was building. Each decision made perfect sense on its own. None of them felt irresponsible. That's what makes this trap so difficult to spot. Psychologists sometimes call this the Diderot effect. One upgrade quietly creates the desire for another. A nicer home makes the old dining table feel out of place. The new dining table makes the living room feel outdated. Before long, you're not just improving your lifestyle. You're trying to make everything around you match, and your income disappears almost as quickly as it arrives. Oliver noticed something strange. Every raise made him feel wealthier for a few months. Then that feeling faded. His new lifestyle became normal, and suddenly he needed another raise just to feel the same sense of progress again. That's the problem with lifestyle inflation. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens so gradually that you barely notice it. Imagine getting a $10,000 raise. Most people immediately think about what they can buy with it. Very few ask, what if I never spend most of this? Oliver eventually started doing something different. Whenever his income increased, he increased his investments first. Only then did he think about upgrading his lifestyle. It felt backwards at first, but over time, he realized he wasn't depriving himself. He was making sure his future benefited before his spending did. That one habit quietly changed the direction of his financial life. And because the goal isn't to stop enjoying your success, the goal is to make sure every success doesn't quietly become another monthly expense. And once Oliver understood that, he started noticing another trap, one that feels even more convincing, because this time, it's not your lifestyle trying to fool you. It's your own confidence. As Oliver's investments continued to grow, he noticed something he hadn't expected. The biggest risks were no longer obvious. Years earlier, he worried about saving enough money. Now, he had to worry about protecting the money he'd already built. And surprisingly, that required a completely different mindset. One afternoon, Oliver looked at a stock he'd owned for years. It had performed incredibly well. What started as a small investment had quietly become one of the biggest positions in his portfolio. Selling it felt wrong. After all, it had helped him get this far. What if it kept going higher? But another question kept bothering him. What if almost everything I built now depends on one decision? That's the strange thing about success. The investments that make you money are often the hardest ones to let go of. Not because they're bad investments, but because you become emotionally attached to them. The same thing happened with confidence. After several good years in the market, Oliver caught himself believing he had figured investing out. He started reading about individual stocks, wondered if he should make bigger bets, thought maybe the slow approach that had built his wealth was no longer enough. It's a surprisingly common feeling. When things go well for long enough, it's easy to mistake a good environment for personal skill. But markets have a way of humbling that kind of confidence. The people who stay wealthy usually aren't the ones who make the boldest predictions. They're the ones who keep following the plan that worked in the first place. Then Oliver discovered another lesson that almost nobody talks about. Sometimes keeping more money has nothing to do with earning more of it. It has to do with giving away less of it unnecessarily. He began paying more attention to taxes, to when he sold investments, to where different assets were held. Not because he enjoyed spreadsheets, but because small decisions repeated over decades can quietly make an enormous difference. That's when he realized something. Building wealth isn't only about making good investments, it's about avoiding unnecessary mistakes that rarely feel dramatic. They usually arrive disguised as confidence, impatience, or the belief that this time will be different. And that's exactly why they're so dangerous. Because once you've built meaningful wealth, the biggest challenge isn't making more money, it's making sure your own decisions don't slowly give it away. By this point, Oliver had learned something he wished someone had told him years earlier. Building wealth is only the first half of the journey. Keeping it is a completely different skill. When he was younger, he thought the biggest threats would be obvious: a market crash, a recession, losing his job. But those weren't the things that kept quietly eating away at people's financial lives. It was the decisions that felt completely reasonable in the moment. The house that was just a little bigger, the investment that had become too important to sell. The belief that one more raise would finally make him feel secure. None of those choices looked dangerous by themselves. Together, they could undo years of progress. That's why the people who quietly stay wealthy often look surprisingly ordinary. They don't make financial decisions to impress other people. They make them to protect their future selves. Oliver eventually realized that protecting wealth isn't about constantly making brilliant moves. It's about making fewer unnecessary ones. Sometimes the smartest decision is to leave your investments alone. Sometimes it's choosing not to upgrade your lifestyle. Sometimes it's spending an afternoon updating your insurance or your estate plan instead of chasing another investment opportunity. Those decisions will never make headlines. No one congratulates you for having a diversified portfolio, or for keeping cash aside for emergencies, or for sticking with a simple plan during a difficult market. But those quiet decisions are often the reason some people stay financially free, while others slowly drift backwards. Looking back, Oliver understood that wealth had never really been about the number in his investment account. It was about what that number allowed him to do. Sleep without constantly worrying about money. Say no to opportunities that weren't right for him. Spend time with the people who mattered instead of always chasing the next paycheck. That's a kind of wealth you can't always measure on a balance sheet. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. Most people think financial freedom is built through a few extraordinary decisions. In reality, it's usually protected by hundreds of ordinary ones, because in the end, The goal isn't simply to build wealth. It's to build a life where that wealth quietly gives you more choices, more peace of mind, and more time to enjoy the life you work so hard to create.